and welcome back to episode 19 of the Down to the Wire podcast. This is attempt number 2 of recording because it cut out the first time. We're back again, updating you with the latest and greatest from sport from the previous week. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good. Wasn't much football on, so not much to talk about there from my point of view. But Wales won, so I'm happy.
Got to be happy when Wales win. And we are also joined by special guest Dav. How you doing, Dav?
Evening, gentlemen. Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you.
Very good, very good. Yes, we Dav is a good friend of ours, and he's also well versed on goings on in the championship. So we thought it'd be nice to have Dav on, kind of give us an update because Dav's a Swans fan. So yeah, it'd be interesting to have a bit of a discussion about the championship. We've also got a bit of Premier League football to discuss, a bit of Champions League football, and as Jack mentioned earlier, a bit of the Six Nations rugby. Perhaps looking forward to I guess technically it's the final round, but France have still got to play Scotland, haven't they? So it's kind of like
an interesting dynamic, that, isn't it?
It's going to be a bit of a weird one.
Mm.
So I guess we should just. Well, actually, before we crack on, it'd be good to talk about the championship. We don't often, I say often, I don't think we've ever talked about the championship football on this podcast, have we, Jack?
I think maybe we have once.
Maybe briefly. Briefly. I think, like I said, Dav's a Swansea fan, so hopefully you'll be able to give us all of the knowledge, Dav. But, it's not always easy to keep track of what's going on in the championship. It looks like it's been an interesting season. So
in the best league in the world.
In the best league in the world. And Swansea pushing for promotion. So all happy from your end, I guess.
Yeah, looking forward to that a bit later on, yeah.
Skipping ahead I am. Too excited. There we are. Should we crack on with some Premier League football, chaps?
Let's do it.
Cool, good stuff. Right, first topic of discussion. Mr. Wilder has been sacked from Sheffield United. Bit of an interesting one, I thought. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were.
I didn't really like him, if I'm honest. I thought he brought a different dynamic with having overlapping centre-backs. But apart from that, he just seemed to want to have arguments with all the other managers. It was like he'd love to pick a bone with Klopp about the 5 substitute rule rather than 3. It was like, every vote counts. You've got to have I think it's like, I think you have to have like 17 of the 20 teams agreeing on something for it to be implemented. And he was more than happy to be one of the 3 every single time. And it's like, when you're at the bottom, it's like you're just there, as another vote. Like that vote is going to change in a year's time when somebody else came up. So it's just like, it's such a nothing thing. But he just, I'm just like, I'm not too bothered.
Go on, Dad. What are your thoughts?
I think poor old Chris Wilder.
Yeah, so do I. I think so. As in, I
think Jack's just gone straight in for his personality there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You've said nothing about football. You've just said don't like him.
Yeah. Okay. On the other side, I get what you mean. I am gutted that he's gone in the sense of he's brought Sheffield all the way from League One all the way to the Premiership, all up to, was it 9th position last year? But
yeah.
Personality-wise, I'm not bothered. But that was my
the story is like it's his hometown club. He's taken them from League One. He's just he's a victim of second season syndrome, isn't he?
Yeah.
With a few other things coming in on top. There's some disagreements with the owners in the background, I think, and I'm sure we'll mention it a couple of times, but. You cannot take COVID out of the equation the way that they play.
No.
The size of their squad.
It's it's crazy to think as well. Like, I remember at one point last season, Sheffield were on for Champions League.
Yeah.
They did really well last season. I mean, like you said, David, the second season syndrome. They struggled.
Going into the season, most people thought rock bottom. I don't think anybody thought they were going to stay up. But
last
top
year?
10. Yeah, last year.
Yeah,
they were favourites to go down straight. So maybe this has been coming. Maybe it was always inevitable that they were going to go down sooner rather than later, especially as, any club that, even if you get survival, but any club that comes up, newly promoted side, always, if you're going to bolster, you've got to go with experienced guys. And they've gone, hey, let's go sign, what's his face? The guy from Liverpool.
Yeah, they signed Brewster for 23 million.
And it's a rip-off, firstly, but also it's a player who's not really got any experience, particularly at the bottom. It's like we've spoken in the past about managers, certain managers being good at the bottom, middle, and the top of the league. They've all got different characteristics or tactics which they like to implement, which only work in certain clubs. But it's like the same can be said for certain players. It's like you get some players who are just made to be scrappers, meant to be down at the bottom, meant to just tussle it out with the best of them. But yeah, I don't think Ryan Brewster was a smart investment at the very least. But
it's been difficult for them though, isn't it? Because I don't think they've not scored in over half their games this season, which says all you need to know about the issues that they've got. So you can understand why he wanted to bolster his forward line. But it was just a massive gamble, wasn't it? 23 million. He was well thought of at Liverpool, but he didn't. You know, it was a gamble for sure to spend that much money on a teenager.
Do you think had Wilder not performed so well, I say Wilder is in Sheffield, but obviously, you know, he's a manager. Do you think if Sheffield hadn't have done so well last season, you know, like say, for example, they finished just outside relegation last year, and then, because like, I mean, mathematically they can probably still survive, but I don't think it's likely, is it? I don't know what the numbers are specifically, but
they're 13 from safety, 10 games remaining, and they've scored just 14 from the first 28 games.
Yeah, there we go. So, you know, without wanting to be too pessimistic, they look like they're going down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they had finished just outside relegation last year and then this year they got relegated, do you think, you know, it's not unheard of for teams that are relegated to keep their boss, you know? I think Sean Dyche is a perfect example of that. Burnley got promoted. Did they get relegated in their first season or something like that?
They definitely got relegated at some point. I can't remember what season it was in. But, I think he maybe even come up and down twice before staying up.
Yeah. So, you know, it's not unheard of. Do you think perhaps Wilder's been a bit of a victim of his own success a little bit?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you know, with hope comes expectation, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So, or you know, with expectation comes hope. So they overperformed definitely last season, and it's Norwich is an example of that now because they got relegated last year, but Daniel Farke stayed on, and at the moment, like we come on to it later, but Norwich are looking pretty good at the top of the championship. So it's the way that you go about it, and I think what will worry any Sheffield United fans will be the fact that Wilder went last weekend and then they got absolutely smashed by Leicester on the Sunday.
Yeah, it's not ideal, is it? You kind of hope that when there seems to be a bit of a trend nowadays, doesn't there, where almost teams will sack a manager not because they have a good person lined up or, you know, they think the next person is going to be long term, but almost to get that kind of initial boost just to kind of get them through the rest of the season.
To be fair, West Brom did similar with Darren Moore, and they had him. They had that boost. They didn't stay up, and they went down. And sort of the opposite to what Norwich happened, and they went pretty much a little bit further down. So it doesn't always work, but
it's in like I remember when Di Canio went to Sunderland.
Oh, you know, that was awesome.
Well, let's be real. Di Canio is not a particularly great manager, but he somehow just purely on the basis of being a different manager from what came before, managed to keep them up. So I feel a little bit sorry for old Chrissy Wilder, to be honest. I guess, I mean, it's easy to say this when you're not a Sheffield United fan, but I feel like he did enough to deserve a second chance.
I saw him described as earlier this week as Sheffield United's Alex Ferguson, like what he'd done for the club. I think by the looks of it, it comes down to there's something not right between him and the owner, and if you'd had the older chairman in there, they might well have kept him on. But
maybe
the concern for Sheffield United fans will be what Jack just said, that they go down and they're not able to compete next season, and people will come and pick off their best players. And
although saying that, Wolves went down, got I think one of few, maybe two teams that have ever been relegated twice in the Premiership, and look where they are now. So who knows? Maybe it's good to go down twice.
Well, there's quite a few teams that have done that, though, isn't there? Portsmouth have done it. Sunderland have done it.
Wigan have done it as well, haven't they?
Yeah, there's quite a few teams that have done that. I think that's you drop and you just drop because of the. But I think that's different. That's to do with finances and whatever.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
Sheffield United are in that same boat. But
Well, no, you got to spend money first, haven't you?
all I'll say is I look out for Chris Wilder in the Championship. I don't think he'd be out of a job for too long.
Oh no, definitely not. Well, as in you don't turn. It's not like he had a flash in the pan season, one season in the Championship, gotten promoted. As in, he's grinded out from a couple of divisions down to get them in. A little bit like Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, very kind of a similar situation. Managed to kind of get them up, but then Eddie Howe still hasn't got a job, has he?
He's waiting out for Southgate, isn't he? At some point, it's going to come a knocking.
Yeah, there we are.
On a similar trend, though, like Southampton, they sacked Nigel Adkins to get Mauricio Pochettino in. And last year, Brighton sacked Chris Hughton after keeping them up. Or was it the year before that? But they sacked Chris Hughton anyway, who's now at Forest. But sometimes just being at the bottom, clubs just aren't satisfied and they just go,
no.
Regardless, we want a change just because we need, even if we're safe, it's like we want something to take us to the next level. And yeah, I understand what you're saying about
gamble.
The owner and all that, and perhaps there's a falling out there and all that. But sometimes I think, naturally, you do get some clubs where it works holding on to the manager. But I mean, the Premier League's a different beast. You want to stay in it because of the money, and when you fall out, what can happen to you in terms of Wigan, Portsmouth, Wolves for a stage. It can go double down, but yeah.
Fair enough. Should we move on to the next topic of discussion?
Yeah, let's.
I mean, I haven't used anything about this, Jack. I'm assuming you put this note in. I don't know whether you want to take this point forward.
It was just something I spotted on BBC News. Guardiola was annoyed at the Manchester City pitch because it said it's not as good as other pitches. He said he blamed Russia, I think, or somewhere. And he said the pitch was better than what they got in Manchester City. It just surprised me because I noticed when they played Southampton, I think it was a couple of days before the article came out, I thought, gosh, that's a brown pitch. I was thinking it really was boggy. And apparently there's been like loads of issues with it in terms of they were going to do stuff onto it last season, towards the end of the season. They just didn't get to because of COVID. I just thought it was interesting. Because they only lost one game. So when I put it in, it was like, can Pep sort of put it on that? But I mean, they've gone on and hammered a few teams recently. So, I mean, my point was almost redundant from that.
I feel like City, out of all of the teams in the league, are probably the ones who would suffer most from that sort of thing, just because of the type of football they play. But a bit of a weird one, that. And I guess, like they had the bit of a weird season last season, isn't it? So they kind of finished later and then started this season not that long after. So the pitch hasn't had that amount of time to recover, I guess.
He's got nothing else to complain about, though, is he? Let's be fair.
No, that's true.
No.
That's true.
I mean, 4 players for every position.
He wants to come down Rodney Parade and see the state of that pitch. Then he'll complain.
There's nothing quite like watching the FA Cup football when Spurs play Newport. Just whenever one of the big teams inevitably gets Newport, because they always love to go on a charge, it's just pure highlight football of just brown mud up everybody's kits. You can't tell who's who. It's a mirage of brown on all the kits.
I mean, their pitch is so bad at the moment. They played in a couple of games over at the Cardiff City Stadium because the pitch just needs a break.
I did not know that. Wow.
So,
that's rough.
As you say, Jack, the quality of the player that they've got at Man City. I mean, if they can't play on a bobbly pitch, then what hope of the Sunday League got?
You're not wrong there, to be fair. I mean, Guardiola is really just describing every team's dilemma below the Championship, basically. I think.
Yeah.
And like you said, Dav, as in when the only thing you can really complain about is the state of your pitch, you're in good circumstances, really. As in, like, you as Liverpool fans, like, having to witness flipping Jordan Henderson as centre-half for the 10th time with the 1 billionth centre-half partnership we've had this season. And Guardiola's like, that pitch is a bit dodgy, though.
Who's the real loser here?
Yeah.
I know who I'd rather be.
Who's really in trouble? Because I don't think it's us.
Little bit of Miracle Grow, sort him out, no problem.
I mean, I was going to make a joke about the fact that Guardiola has no hair there, but perhaps I'll leave that one for now. A little bit unnecessary. There we are. Going briefly to not necessarily Champions League, but briefly. Well, again, another slight dig there. Definitely not Champions League. Juventus potentially. Now, I read something about this that they were kind of slight rumours that he was potentially going to be leaving Juventus.
He being Ronaldo, that is. I don't know if
Yeah,
that was mentioned.
Not apologies. Yeah, Ronaldo. Well, who else was it going to be? Let's be fair.
Pirlo. Oh, he's not going to be there very long, is he?
That's true.
But 25 mil, they're saying, because they just want to get his contract off the books. That's a hit.
Yeah, the old lady is sorting out her purse, isn't she?
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Dan.
Sorry, no, I was going to say the difficulty is going to be on what he wants. In that, does he still want to compete in the Champions League?
I don't envision him going back to Sporting Lisbon. But yeah, I know what you mean. Does he? Wow, yeah. Where does Ronaldo go? Because he's not going to go back to Madrid.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I did read something the other day where Zidane basically didn't rule it out.
I don't think anybody would rule out having him, but I think from Ronaldo's point of view, I'm sure he's like been there, conquered. I'm on to the next thing. Maybe you go to France. Maybe he goes, hey, that Mbappe kid's quite good. I'll play with him. They need a striker.
Yeah, well,
I mean, try juggling Ronaldo, Mbappe, and Neymar though.
Oh yeah,
that's a lot of
Neymar
personalities,
on the left,
isn't it?
Mbappe on the right, Ronaldo.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much to do with the pitch, though, is it? It's to do with the personalities.
Yeah, that's a lot of ego to manage in one dressing room, isn't it?
To be fair, Neymar and Cavani used to have it out, didn't they, for penalties?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, just kind of going off on that briefly, because I've seen a few things now. Would you class Ronaldo at Juve as a success?
No, certainly not. I mean, the fact that they haven't even gotten into the semis in both of the years he's been there, and the only reason they bought him was for the Champions League. And if anything, they're taking a backward step. But I don't think that's all on Ronaldo. I feel like the fact that they sacked... I can't remember. Did they have a leg?
Sarri. No, Sarri.
Sarri. Yeah. But yeah, the fact that they sacked him, then got Pirlo, it's just like sort of a storm of things that probably weren't going to work out.
Well, and I don't know about you as well. I feel like there were players at Juve that, like, say, 3 or 4 years ago, everyone was like, "Oh, give it a few years, and this guy's going to be really special." Like Dybala, he hasn't really. I mean, it's difficult to judge properly because we don't necessarily watch a lot of the Serie A. Well, I don't anyway. I don't know about you guys, but as in, I don't know. I feel like Dybala, he's still a good player, but I don't think he's quite hit the heights that everyone was saying that he was going to. Perhaps that's a bit unfair, maybe.
To be fair, playing in a team like Juventus, I don't think anybody stands out. It's like it is true. When you're all meant to be world-class players. It's like, it's like looking for a silver spoon in a drawer of silver spoons. It's like they all look identical. So yeah, maybe he just doesn't shine because of that. But yeah, I mean, to be fair as well, he also plays cam and
off the ball.
I mean, yeah. Well, I know he's a sort of hybrid player who can play anyway, but predominantly he's a cam. And how many teams play with an outright cam at the moment? I think Man United play Bruno, and that's about it. As much as I can visually think of, everyone plays a couple of left attacking mids, a couple of right attacking mids. Got to get all the width, but yeah, someone right through the middle doesn't happen too often. So maybe that's why it's not working out.
What about you, Dav? Would you class it as a failure or a success, Ronaldo at Juve?
Well, he went there to win the Champions League, didn't he? And he hasn't done that. So I suppose you'd have to say it hasn't paid off for him.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's one of those where Serie A being what it is, it's nice to see it a bit competitive this year. But have they won like 9 in a row or something? So like winning Serie A is like standard. Like you'd expect minimum, to win that. It? Yeah, he went there for the Champions League and he hasn't won it. So I don't think he'd say it's a success in that sense. And as Jack said, like actually they've kind of taken a step backwards. But that's not to do with him. I don't think that's to do with the management and the way they've gone through a couple of managers the last few years, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the thing is as well for Juve, they're in that kind of tricky scenario where Ronaldo is kind of defying his age at the moment, isn't he? But as in, at some point, you'd assume that it is going to start to drop off.
Nah, see, I don't think it will. I think the routine he puts himself in, the fitness and what he eats all the time is constant. And I think that's what separates him from a lot of other players who are just good, is the fact that Ronaldo he's just a physical specimen.
But
his body fat percentage is like 1% or something nuts like that. There's nothing on it.
As in, the longer they keep a hold of him, the less, and it doesn't matter how good Ronaldo still is, the longer they hold Ronaldo, the less and less they're going to get for him, just purely on the basis of, it's in like different players are different, aren't they? Some players have a kind of a gradual decline. Like for me, I when I see a gradual decline, I think of Lampard. As in, Lampard didn't really he didn't like go from being amazing to struggling. He kind of like gradually, and that like he became more of a squad player than week in, week out. Whereas like for me, Steven Gerrard was the complete opposite. Gerrard's performances went from like really high and they kind of dropped off a lot in his final season of Liverpool. So is Ronaldo going to be one of those ones where it's a gradual decline, or is it going to be one of those ones where it's kind of like an immediate decline? And just based on the fact that he's so good, for a football player at an older age, is it going to be like a kind of a gradual decline, or is it going to be like a off the cliff kind of decline? And the longer they hold him, I guess the more unknown that variable becomes. So teams are going to be less willing to invest. So,
personally, I think he'll retire at the top. In a sense, I don't think he'll ever decline to a point where he's even sort of considered has he passed it? I don't think that question's ever going to come up. I just feel like he's just got that ethic about him, which doesn't ever drop below that standard.
Is he ever going to be able to maintain his career to the point where you can justify his wages like what he wants as a football club?
I reckon so.
I think that's why where he goes next is limited, though, isn't it? Because who's going to pay that out?
And, well, I think the only team realistically that could, teams I should say, are probably City, PSG, and Real Madrid. I don't think there's worldwide. I don't think there's any of and financially United, but I don't think. I don't see why he'd go to United right now, to be honest.
He wants to win the Champions League, Jack, doesn't he? He's not going to go there.
I see it appealing to be at United right now. We're on the up. He's played for United before. We're in Champions League still.
But if your logic for him not going to Real Madrid is being there, done that, why would he go back to United?
Because that's like over a decade ago. And to be fair, I don't think he ever... Well, he did conquer because he won an all there, but he was only there for a couple of years. He wasn't there for a long period of time. He's been at PSG for more than a decade. Not PSG, at Real Madrid more than a decade. So I feel there's still unfinished business at United. I feel confident we could nab him. We could nab him up. He'd never go to City. That's just a guarantee.
No, of course he wouldn't. No, but I just mean from a financial point of view. I mean, I think he'd be. I think the most likely is to go back to Madrid. I really do, and then I think after that it would probably be PSG, and then probably United. I'll be honest with you. I feel like getting Ronaldo would kind of be against what Man United have been building for the past 2 or 3 years. They've kind of invested not necessarily in box office players, but they've made shrewd signings. I say shrewd. They've spent a lot of money, but as in, like gone for solid players like Wan-Bissaka. As in not necessarily a global superstar in his position, but as in a solid player. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Ronaldo. I mean, I would not be surprised if he stays at Juventus for another 2 or 3 seasons, to be honest. It's normally how these transfer rumours work, isn't it? There we are. Right, Dan, we didn't really tell you about this. This is one thing we probably should have told you about. We do the highlight of the week. Now, I don't know whether you've got one or whether you want to do one.
Yeah, I've got one.
Oh, you've got one. Good man. Good man. Right. Well, Jack,
I
do you want to?
informed him beforehand. I did.
It's good because I wasn't on the ball with that one. So, Jack, do you want to start off? I'll do mine, and then Dav we'll move on to you then.
Great.
My highlight of the week was the Louis Rees-Zammit try against Italy. Just absolutely rapid. Interception, 80 metres. And to be fair, the last chunk he was sort of just at a light jog, even though it was quicker than everybody. But at the beginning,
bolted it, didn't he? Like
yeah,
in
it was like, I'm off.
Yeah,
I am off. But when that happened, it was just like a whoa, he's got some legs. But yeah, did enjoy that.
I mean, the acceleration was just beyond, wasn't it? I don't think.
Like as good as George North always was, I can't imagine George North ever doing a run like that. Like, it's just a different type of player. Just a different type of player.
I mean, it's nice to have, like for Wales, I guess we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's nice to have two out-and-out finishers on the wing. As in, don't get me wrong, like George North was excellent on the wing, but he was never... I don't know, he just... Like Josh Adams and Louis Rees-Zammit have that kind of ability to... They just finish tries. Like they
get the ball, it goes on the ground over the line.
Yeah.
Very rarely does anything else happen.
I think it's just kind of the type of player that they are. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the Six Nations. My highlight of the week was Stephen Gerrard shutting down the ITV sports reporter when they asked him about the Liverpool job. And the reason this was my highlight was because Rangers had just won the first league title in it was like a decade, I think, wasn't it? It's been a long time. And the only thing that the ITV Sports, or one of the only things that he could talk about was, oh well, Jurgen Klopp's struggling. Do you want the job? It's like, oh come on, mate, give him his moment of triumph. And and Gerrard literally was just like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, Liverpool fans don't want me as their manager; they want Jurgen Klopp. And I wish you knew how much. And that was it. It was like, oh, okay. So, as a Liverpool fan, that was my highlight of the week. Dav, over to you.
Mine's maybe a little bit more of a take a step back, slightly more sentimental. But I know that you lads are big into your F1, and we had the first time trial practice last week when it to kind of testing out the new cars, and I thought it was a sporting highlight to see M. Schumacher back on the timesheet for Haas.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that is a good one.
Did you see that they quite heavily were talking about in the commentary was the abbreviation? Like, obviously with the name Schumacher, he could have just done SCH, but when Michael Schumacher was in the Formula One, he couldn't use SCH because there was also, is it Schwartzman? I think that was another driver, or someone along that line. Maybe? Say again, what's the name?
There's loads. Schechter.
Yeah, it was somebody else, but basically he couldn't have SCH because there were loads of SCHs. So we went MSC, and it was nice that Mick Schumacher went, I can go SCH, but sort of a nod to his dad. I'm going to go MSC. I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, well, I got to say, Dav, your highlight was a lot more mature than my highlights. We're thinking very, very much on different levels there, but no, that was a good one. I didn't. And I certainly didn't clock what you said, Jack. That is interesting, in fairness.
Yeah, I'm good like that.
You're good like that, and humble as well. Right, should we?
Incredibly humble.
Should we talk about the Champions League?
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Okay. So, how do we want to do this? Are we just going to go through?
Well, I'm also. Let's say, who do we think is going to win?
The thing.
Yeah, who do we think is going to win it all? Let's just straight out right now, and then sort of like to and fro as to maybe going through each one and seeing why we think or don't think that may be the case.
Oof, that's I don't even know where to start with that. Do you have someone in mind, Jack?
Well, I think Bayern Munich are going to win it all. I think out and out favourites. I think they got the most complete squad. They won it last. They did win it last year, and I don't think, apart from PSG and Man City, I don't think anybody else really is on level with them.
Can't disagree with that.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I think probably before this round of the Champions League, I would have said Bayern Munich.
Mm-hmm.
But
what are you thinking now?
Well, this is the thing. It's not necessarily that I have another team in mind, but what I would say is this. So, in the Bundesliga, Leipzig are, well, I say are, they were only like 3 points behind Bayern Munich. Now, over the course of 2 legs, Liverpool rather comfortably beat Leipzig, despite all of the troubles that Liverpool have had this season. As in, this is one of Liverpool's worst seasons in a long time. Now, I know league form and Champions League form is very different. But if Liverpool can beat a team comfortably over 2 legs that's only just behind Bayern Munich, then surely there are, as in like when you think of how well Chelsea are playing at the moment, how well City are playing at the moment, I don't know, I guess in my head, Bayern Munich aren't quite as...
Well,
is it in my head they were clear favourites? Let's put it that way. In my head they were clear favourites, and now I'm kind of there like, well, if you look at it on that basis, you'd have Chelsea and City up there right now. I think. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for perhaps some of the non-English sides because again, we don't watch them as much on a week-to-week basis. But yeah,
I'll be honest. On that logic, I don't think there can be any blame that Man United aren't in the Champions League knockouts because in their group was PSG and RB Leipzig. And I feel like United got berated when they went out. And it's like, well, now we're talking up Leipzig, now that Liverpool have beaten them. Oh. No, I don't think Leipzig are all that. I just think they're the best of a bad bunch in Bundesliga. And for some reason, Bayern Munich aren't running away with it, but I'm not sure why. But yeah, that's just my opinion on that. I just wanted to put United out there because I was like, wow, we're only out of it because we were in a hard group.
Well, again, though, I think you could say you were in a hard group, but then Liverpool have beaten Leipzig comfortably over 2 legs despite all of their troubles this season. So, I mean, look, there's no shame in losing to PSG. As in PSG are a very good side. I think it was more the fact that the Leipzig result, I guess. But I guess in my head, what I was saying is that, before this round of the knockouts, I was like, well, Bayern Munich, hands down. Whereas now I've got that little bit of doubt. I'm like, well, if Leipzig are only 3 points away and Liverpool have beaten Leipzig comfortably over 2 legs, does that open the door for other competitors, I guess?
I don't think I wouldn't rate just because they're in the same league. It's the same most seasons, isn't it? Like you don't say in the past we haven't said, oh, Juventus aren't very good because like so and so hammered Napoli or whatever it is. Like I think Bayern Munich are by far and away the best team in that division. And last season Champions League showed that it doesn't really matter who they come up against. They can win well, they can win ugly. Like what Jack said, they have got the most complete squad. And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. I think you can look at other leagues and think, oh, they must be good because they're second or third. But if you put them in the Premier League, they might be 8th or 9th.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I tell you what, I mean, in terms of dark horse outside bets, I do agree with the Chelsea shout. Yeah. Purely because they don't concede goals. They are just the model of defensive reliability. And I do think, well, people always say attacks win games, defenses win titles. And I don't know how much I actually agree with that. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't concede a goal, you can't lose a game. And
that's like Michael Owens here. Yeah, but yeah, I think Chelsea are an out. I reckon if Bayern don't win it, I honestly think it's going to be Chelsea.
I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like all of the English teams have a good shout. When I say a good shout, I mean as in Chelsea and City both playing very well domestically. Liverpool, okay, they're struggling domestically, but they seem to they seem to have an ability to turn up for the bigger games. I mean, of the three, obviously, I think they'd probably be least likely to win. But as in, Real Madrid aren't quite the force that they have been in past years. I mean, obviously, Porto have caused the biggest upset of the round just gone, haven't they, by beating Juventus?
Interestingly, in that game, the second leg, they won the tie by losing the game, which meant that they drew overall. So they did manage to win, lose, and draw in one game, which was quite impressive.
You should save that for your stat of the week, mate. That's a good one. It's in like when it's. I've got to be honest though. I feel like that's quite a strong last 16. A strong
quarterfinal. Well, we mentioned it was a good last 16. And if Juventus had gone through against Porto, just looking at the reputations or stature of the clubs, you go, "Oh, that's a quarterfinal that really is mouth-watering." But yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know what you guys think, but generally, I think that when you get to the quarterfinals, there's always like one team where you look at it and you go, "Oh, well, that's the easy draw then." But if Porto managed to knock out Juve, they're clearly no mugs, are they? Let's be fair, that's pretty impressive when you think of the the finances and the clout that Juventus have. To be honest with you, I think on paper, like Dav said, I think Bayern Munich, they've clearly got. Firstly, they've got the experience, which I think is huge in the Champions League. They've clearly got the squad depth, so I think on paper it's Bayern Munich, but in practice, I think it's anyone's bet really. I'd be reluctant to call it. Really reluctant.
I think from a purely footballing perspective, you'd have to say that if the draw fell for City, you wouldn't see any reason why they couldn't win it.
Exactly.
I think one of the things for them, I think, is the monkey on their back of recent seasons where they've gone out in the Champions League to teams that they really should have beaten. They went out to Lyon last season.
Yeah, definitely.
They went out to Spurs when Guardiola went running down the touchline and then VAR brought it back. They went out to Monaco on away goals a few years ago. So psychologically, they always seem to get to a point. I think it was last season, they were playing Lyon, and Guardiola puts out a completely different formation. Really overthinks it. Did he play three at the back or did he change his midfield? I can't quite remember. But he tried to tinker with it too much because he knew he wanted to win the Champions League, and he messed about with what he knew. I mean, who am I to say this? Guardiola knows more than me, but it obviously didn't work for him.
Yeah, well, I mean,
so there's a psychological monkey on their back, isn't there, when it comes to the Champions League, that they've never quite done it, and until they win it, you think that's always going to be on them, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of similar to how Liverpool have been with the league for so long, but as in, to be honest with you, I think Man City could almost do with having. In a weird way, they could do with having tough opposition in the next game, because I think if they draw at Porto or a Dortmund, again, there's almost that kind of expectation. Will Guardiola? Because I remember he did it against Liverpool as well. He did something a few years ago. He played Gundogan as a winger. You're like, why is he doing that for? As in but yeah. So I feel like City could almost do a big fixture to kind of get themselves up for the game and go and win, because I think on their day, City are as good as anyone, really.
Well, yeah, they beat Real Madrid, didn't they, last year?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, they go then." And then they drew Lyon, and he changed the way he played. So, but I think the same thing applies to PSG as well. They've not won it. There's big pressure on them to win it because you're expected to win Ligue 1 every year.
Lovely pronunciation.
But Pochettino has got them playing well.
Yeah.
But I think it's that same. There's that expectation that if you don't win it, it's a disappointing season.
Yeah. And to be fair,
but those two teams could win it. Yeah, go on.
One of the monkeys that was on their back was that they lost that incredible game against Barca a few years ago, where they came back from I think they won the first leg 4-1, but then lost the second leg. I can't remember what it was, maybe 5-2 or something nuts like that, and it was like, oh, but they dispatched Barca this year, so maybe maybe one of those monkeys is gone. But yeah, who knows?
I mean, it's never going to be a bad thing to have Pochettino as your manager, is it? Certainly not a bad thing to have a manager of that caliber coming in. And, like we said, Chelsea, they've kind of this season's taken a turn for the better since they've had such a fairly convincing result against a very good Atletico side at the moment. Is this as good a chance as Chelsea have had in a long time? And is it a case that they not necessarily prioritise the Champions League, but as in it's been a little while since Chelsea have been in this position in the Champions League, if I remember correctly. So as in, why not go for it? And I guess this is what I'm saying, as in, if you look at each team's perspective, if things fall in their favour, I guess, for want of a better phrase, it's anyone's guess, really.
That's why we love it.
Exactly, David. That's why this podcast exists, because we love stuff like this. Absolutely. So, all right, then let's do it this way. We all have to give who we think is going to win. Jack Freeman, who's going to win the Champions League?
See, I did say Bayern Munich at the beginning, but
he's backtracking now.
Yeah, I am backtracking. I'm gonna say against all odds, I think it's gonna be Chelsea.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Dav, who do you think is going to win?
There's no backtracking here. I'm sticking with Bayern.
Okay, I'm going to go with PSG. I think Poch is going to take them to the next level.
PSG?
There we are. Yeah, I genuinely, as in like, I don't know. I've always really rated Pochettino as a manager, and I think he could finally be the man to take them to the Champions League. Like, let's not forget, Paris Saint-Germain got to the Champions League final last time, so clearly they've got a good enough team to get there. Can they go to the next step? Who knows? Anyway, from Champions League football to Championship football, where the real football is. Thank you. where the real football is played, Dave?
Where the real football happens.
Where the real football happens. There we are. Right. So how, Jack? I don't know what your knowledge of the Championship is this season, because you follow Forest, don't you?
I am a part-time supporter of Nottingham Forest. Yes. I think if you own a season ticket at least once to a club, you are entitled to own a fanship of that team. So I did own a season ticket for 2 years, so I feel like I'm accredited as a Nottingham Forest fan on the side. Okay,
fair enough. Can't argue with that. So, Dav, how has the season been shaping up?
Well, it is all to play for, really, I would say. I genuinely think it is the most competitive league, I'd say, in Europe, but therefore the world, because I think on your day, any team can beat anyone.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know that is true in the Premier League as well. But I feel like there's a higher level of unpredictability when you get to the Championship.
Well, and the thing is as well, like, even as somebody who doesn't necessarily follow Championship football closely, it just seems relentless. It's just like game after game after game, and it just feels like like they're just constantly playing. I don't know whether that's wrong, but that's how it feels.
No, especially this season. Especially this season, with it being so condensed. It's Saturday, Tuesday, pretty much every week, and you play 8 games more in the Championship compared to the Prem.
Yeah.
So it's not just the Premier League managers that are saying about fixtures. I think it's the same in the Championship. I think a couple of highlights from the way that the season has panned out. I've got no association with them, but I feel sorry for Wickham. They're bottom of the league. It's their first time they've ever been in the Championship, and they've had to do it more or less, apart from 2 games in December where the fans were allowed in. They've not had any fans.
Oh, that's rubbish, isn't it? man.
Yeah, so they are
Like, you saw
12
the
points
passion
off.
of Akinfenwa when they got promoted in the playoffs, and with
Yeah,
Rollins needs
exactly.
all going around. But yeah, that's not good.
They're 12 points off safety, so it'll be a great escape if they get out from there. So that's a shame for them. And then probably I would say the most high profile appointment of the season was probably Wayne Rooney becoming Derby's manager.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I remember.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I've seen a couple of jokier things about like the way that certain players finish their career, and maybe Derby County isn't the place you want to finish. But given what Rooney did in his career,
it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, so he's at Derby, pulled them out of relegation. They're not out of the woods, but
no, I'll be honest, they're
looking
very
pretty
similar situation to Forest for a bit, where I think both of them were languishing a little bit closer than they thought they wanted to be. So, I'm glad Forest is a little bit further up, but yeah.
So
there's 3/4 of the season gone now, and you still can't really make too many. You can't. There isn't too much nailed on apart from poor old Wickham at the bottom.
Poor old.
To be fair, I've had a partial eye on Swansea for a while in terms of watching them in the league, and they have gradually been picking it up. Am I wrong in it? Because you were like, I don't know where you were. You're about mid-table somewhere, but you've just gone position. You're now all up in third. Like, is it just all the second half of the season charge, or were they just unlucky at the beginning, or is this just gradually been happening?
Yeah, I think it's been more gradual.
Mm-hmm.
The last few games, actually, I don't think we've played that well. I think we are underperforming a little bit. But we've come unstuck on having some games postponed. So you're playing catch up and playing games in, like we played Blackburn midweek last week when most teams had a week off. And those little things make a difference at this stage of the season. So we've been there or thereabouts all season, really. And I think it's just a case of, as with all things in this league, it's just grinding away, really, and trying to keep up with everyone.
Yeah.
You notice you've actually not scored very many goals this season compared to a lot of the other teams, but your defence is absolutely on fire by the looks of things. Is that well? What's happening there? Have you not got a good striker, or?
Well, we haven't really got an out-and-out striker. That was one of the difficulties we had Brewster on loan second half of last season, and he came and scored some goals, and he's an out-and-out centre forward. We've got Andre Ayew, who has stayed on at the club, like the highest paid player by a mile, but he isn't an out-and-out. He's a forward, but he's not a striker.
Yeah, he's like a centre forward, isn't he? He's a kind of that weird.
Yeah, he's a link-up guy, and he's not a natural.
He's not a finisher.
Yeah, exactly. And then last summer we brought in Jamal Lowe from Wigan for 800 grand, which was a good deal, and he has played well for us. He scored some goals, but again, he's not an out-and-out striker, and he's on a really poor run in front of goal at the moment. Like, I don't think he scored in like 14 games.
Yeah.
So
that's rough,
we don't. Yeah, we don't have an out-and-out forward, and unfortunately, the guy that was brought in we brought in a guy on loan from Seattle Sounders, and he did his ACL against Huddersfield a couple of weeks ago. So it's not really gone for them. Yeah, I know. So to be fair, they've played to their strengths. Play 3 centre backs, play with 2 wing backs. So we play in a very efficient way, very structured way. And yeah, I think we've got 18 clean sheets this season, the highest number in the league. So yeah, defence is certainly what it's been built upon. And most times this season, and maybe it's only twice it hasn't happened, where if we've scored first, we've gone on to win the game.
Yeah.
The Sam Allardyce motto: score first.
Yeah, which is a good thing to have. But then, as you say, Jack, I think maybe we've only scored 3 goals in the league, maybe once or twice. So yeah, it's certainly not ideal, and we have been grinding out results recently and getting some lucky decisions with last minute penalties and things. But yeah, that's the way it goes in the division, really.
In terms of the other teams, I don't know how much of an eye you're keeping on them, but Norwich look like they're going up in terms of they got a 10-point gap on Watford in second. Should I be putting Timu Puki in my fantasy team next year? Or is he not doing the bits this year?
Well, no. I mean, it's one of those things with Puki, though, isn't it? Like, I think he scored, I want to say 22 goals. He certainly scored 20 goals this season.
Mm-hmm.
But then he did the same 2 seasons ago, and then in the Prem last year he started well, and then tailed off. There is a difference between the Premier League and the Championship when it comes to time and space.
I feel like there were some players as well who kind of not too good, but as in they're very good in the Championship, and then they're almost like in between Championship and Premier League level. And like you said, as in Pookie kind of started well, didn't he, last season? Then he kind of just fizzled out a little bit. But who knows? That could have just been a bit unlucky.
Yeah, I think Norwich look pretty. They had a little wobble a few games ago, but they've won. I think they've won their last 6 in a row or last 8 in a row or something like that.
Oh wow, that's what you need.
So they've opened that gap up again now, and it's looking pretty good for them.
Yeah.
And what do you think in terms of playoffs? Firstly, do you think Swansea would be in the playoffs, or do you think they'll have nabbed that second automatic promotion spot?
Well, I think it's a playoff minimum now. I would like to think.
Yeah.
And I think I'm genuinely, having watched them recently, last couple of games, I think it's a case of you've got the South Wales derby on Saturday. Ideally, you win that, and then you just have 2 weeks off because they look out on their feet a little bit. There's a bit of fatigue in the legs, and I think that's all to do with if we can win on Saturday and if we can keep the gap to 3 points, because we've got a game in hand on Watford. You win that, and then you've got from Saturday. The Swans will have 9 games left, so then that's your mini season then. To be honest, at the moment, if they carry on playing the way they are, I'm not sure they will get that automatic spot. But this league is it's all about momentum. It's all about momentum. So if I was to ask you, here's a little teaser for you. What team would you say in the last 10, 12 games has got the most points? Who is the informed team in the Championship at the moment?
Well, I'd be cheating because I can see the form chart on our table. But so I'd probably say Norwich because they won the last 5. But in terms of from looking at that table, who's done well?
Well, you can answer Norwich if you want, but that isn't the answer.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Barnsley?
Yeah.
Let's go.
They've come from nowhere. They've come from They've won. I think they've won 9 out of their last 10, but they've not lost in their last. They've not lost in their last 12.
That's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, but you kind of think, with the greatest amount of respect to Barnsley, you just think, Barnsley, like they don't have, they've not been in the Premier League. They haven't got any big time players, so to speak, in that way. But I watched them play Chelsea in FA Cup not that long ago, and they narrowly lost 1-0 and put up a good performance. So they seem to be playing very well, and it looks like if they can keep that up, they'll have come from a little way out to sneak in.
And to be honest with you, like looking at that, we've got on our notes here, we've got a snippet of the top 9. Like apart from Barnsley and Brentford, like the majority of those teams have been in the Premier League fairly recently. Like that's a competitive top 9, and like Brentford's kind of. They almost looked nailed on, didn't they, towards the end of last season? Then it dropped off quite badly for them. Am I right in saying that?
Crazy how on earth they didn't make it in the end. They were in a situation on the last game of the season where they could have won it, but ended up finishing 3rd and losing in the playoffs. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I think they lost to Barnsley actually in that game.
Oh. Did they? Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a strong top 9.
Yeah, you look at 7th, 8th, 9th. That's Bournemouth, Middlesbrough, Cardiff. All teams that have been in the Prem within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's like the next 3 above them are Brentford, Barnsley, Reading. Does that sort of experience of being in the Prem sort of been through the rigmarole and the process of the sort of playoff football for, quite a number of years. Do you think that's going to pay off? Do you think all three of Brentford, Barnsley and Reading are going to stay within that cluster of playoff potential ones? Because, I mean, you look at Brentford last season, it's like, how on earth they managed to miss out? But do you reckon that could be down to the fact that they haven't had that experience at the top before?
Possibly. I mean, they were unlucky last season. I don't think anyone would have begrudged them if they'd gone up, because they do play a very attractive style of football. And I think you got to say fair play to them for being there again, because they lost Ollie Watkins to Villa, they lost Said Bin Rama to West Ham, so they had some of their better players. Yeah. They had some of their better players picked off, and yeah, they're thereabouts again. I think one of the keys. Well, yeah, exactly. But one of the key things is that you look at the three teams that came down last season: Norwich, Watford, and then Bournemouth, who are in seventh. Admittedly, they've fallen away a little bit recently, having changed managers. But those three teams have mainly kept their squad from last season together. They've got rid of a few players, but you look at Norwich City, they've got Pookie up front, they've got Campbell in midfield, they've got Krul in goal, so they've kept a lot of their.
It's a lot of experience there, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of experience. So it's that kind of. It was almost like they had a managed relegation last season. They were kind of buying into a bigger project of, yes, we're going to get relegated. You get a lot of money when you get relegated.
Yeah, you get through parachute payments for 3 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is why Villa had to make it 2 years ago, because if they didn't make it in the playoffs that year, they wouldn't have had the parachute money anymore, and then they'd really be in trouble. Like you were saying about them keeping those squads, they're keeping those squads on the basis of the money they're getting to pay those wages for 3 years. After that point, you're in no man's land. No more help anymore.
Yeah. Which is why when you look at your teams like Stoke City, they took that gamble, that hasn't paid off. Swans came down at the same time as Stoke, and so the parachute payments end this season. So it does affect you. It does affect you financially, definitely.
And I guess what you're saying, Dav, about the like looking at it as a longer term project, that's kind of going back to what we were saying with Chris Wilder and Sean Dyche, isn't it? As in, is it a bit short sighted of Sheffield to go right with sacking you now because it hasn't worked out? As in,
like Sheffield are going down regardless.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
Not a chance they're staying up. So it's like, why don't they just stay with the same system, try and come back up?
And and I think nowadays, as in that seems to be, like you look at Norwich, like you said, Dav, they've kept their manager, haven't they? They've done well. They've kept their good players. They've gone, right, okay, we've been relegated, but this is part of a longer term,
But didn't
plan.
They sacked the manager who went up with them, didn't they, halfway through their season in the Prem?
Well, Norwich?
Last time. Yeah.
Not last season.
No, I don't think they did.
Oh, I'm incorrect on that then. Apologies. Ignore me.
They brought Farker in like the season before.
All right.
To be fair, Watford,
I thought they sacked him halfway through. That was all.
Watford is still sacking managers like no one's business. Like that's just the way they roll, and it seems to work for them generally.
To be fair, you always get that new manager bounce. So if you just sack them 8 times a season, you've got 8 waves of 4 games where you get that new manager bounce. It's great.
Yeah, that's a sustainable way to run a football club.
Once one works, you're great.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I'm just because like I said, because I've not particularly followed the championship. Like that top 9 is really impressive. Like it's a solid, as in, it's a tough one to call. I think. Yeah.
To be fair, when you watch championship football, it is far and away more entertaining to watch than silky smooth football in the top of the Premier League, because it is just raw passion on show. Teams just trying every tactic in the world, lumping it into the box, you got it. Playing it through the middle, you got it. The Championship just has everything. And when, as you were saying earlier, anyone can beat anyone, it's just so true. You don't see Manchester City lose to Sheffield United, but you can watch Norwich, and there's a chance they might lose to one of those bottom guys because it's just that much tighter. Just such a good division to watch. Yeah. Should we move on to our shock of the week?
I am happy to move on to the shock of the week.
Cool.
Who wants to go first?
I don't mind. I went first last time. Somebody else want to go first?
I'll go first because I'll get this out of the way. And I just want to put this out there. If anyone has listened to this podcast the first time, I'm not usually this salty when it comes to things related to Liverpool. Jack may disagree with me on that one. But anyway, my shock of the week is Gareth Southgate's reasoning for leaving Trent Alexander-Arnold out of the England squad. And basically, his justification was, oh, well, he's not been playing particularly well recently. And it's like, mate, you've been picking Jordan Pickford in goals for about 5 years. Like,
no, see, I disagree. I do. I think his reasoning was sound because I feel like the logic behind what he was saying was, I've got Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I've got a couple of guys in the under-21s. And if you look at what Trent's done this year, it's not been great.
No.
In comparison.
But bad enough to not even be in the squad. I'm not saying he has to start, but to say he's not even in the squad.
Do you get the luxury of taking 3 or 4 right backs into a set of internationals? I think you've got to prioritise the midfield usually, haven't you?
Well, I mean,
I think ironically, Liverpool fans over the moon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As in, like, with all the injury troubles we've had, it's kind of just like fine, we'll keep him at Liverpool for a bit. But I guess what I'm saying is in, like, I feel like Gareth Southgate has been, like, for example, he's taken Eric Dyer.
Yeah, okay, that one doesn't quite make sense to me. But
he's still living off that penalty in the World Cup, isn't he?
That's what I mean. It's like, how can Gareth Southgate say, "Oh, I'm not picking him because he's not playing well," and then pick Eric Dyer? Like,
because he did play well once against Colombia. Don't forget, Jack.
There we are. Salty rant over. Right, Jack, do you wanna go next?
Yeah, happy to. My shock of the week was in the Paris-Nice cycling. I think it was the week just gone or halfway into this week. But going into the final stage, Primož Roglič, the guy who lost the Tour de France on the final stage last year, just because he basically got outcycled in the final stage. This time, though, was not really of his own doing, more than the fact that he crashed. But he crashed twice on the final stage, got gapped to the main group, and the main group had the guys who were second and third in it, and they kind of just told all of their assistant cyclists with them in their team, their domestiques, their super domestiques, they said, right, let's speed it up, let's leave them for dust. And both teams worked in unison. Usually you'll find one team sits at the front and they'll rotate amongst each other. But these two teams combined to make an enormous train of people who were rotating at the front, who was sort of doing all the work. And they just gapped him like mad. And he ended up losing Paris-Nice, despite dominating the competition up to that final stage. I think he won 3 of the 7 stages. But yeah, ended up losing it. The guy called Max Schachmann is the guy who ended up winning it. And it was just like the shot, like, it was just like, it was a foregone conclusion that Primož was going to win that competition, and ended up losing it on the last stage with 2 crashes. Very unlucky.
Wow. And again, that's why sport is great, isn't it? Even when someone's nailed on, doesn't happen. There we are. That's a good one.
Well, by shock, Dav, I am taking my physical reaction to a sporting event in the last week, and that came when Mauro Itoje fell over the line against France on the weekend. I'll
be honest, I didn't watch England.
You could say that I'm just having a dig because it's a shock that England won, which, you know, you might take it as that, but it was more the fact, as we'll come on to in a second, how important that try was for Wales's chances. And yeah, given the way that England had been playing, I think you could say maybe it wasn't a bit of a shock.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
I can't argue with that. And on that note, good segue, Dav. Done well there.
You're welcome.
You've smashed that, mate. Well done. Well, should we do England France first then, or no?
Let's do England France first.
Or do we want Wales Italy first? Because that was kind of the there's a lot less to talk about with Wales, Italy, isn't it? In all honesty.
Yeah, literally all of the notes I put was there any doubt? I mean, it was pretty much. I don't think anybody thought Italy had a chance, and they didn't.
Well,
I mean, Wales came out the gates firing, like obliterated. But yeah, wasn't even a contest.
Well, I mean, the thing is in up until now, there's kind of been a question mark of, what things have fallen Wales' way, haven't they? There's been 2 red cards. There was the controversial decisions against England by the referee. But ultimately, the gap between Wales and Italy, I think, is pretty much exactly the same to what it was between France and Italy, and everyone was saying, France are favourites up until this weekend. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I think the thing that was most satisfying as a Welsh fan was that
I think
just seems so clinical.
But the thing with that, though, is that in the past,
like a hot knife.
Typically, because you always see Italy as an easy win, you make some changes, you do a little bit of experimenting. But Pivac named a really strong team because he wants that momentum. Like, we haven't been at our most fluent earlier in the tournament. So it was a real primer, really, for this weekend. And like you say, it was the manner of the win that was most pleasing. Because I don't think there was any doubt we'd beat them, but the way that we beat them, we were very clinical. And we scored 7 tries. Like in international rugby, wherever you're playing, 7 tries is a good return. And I think that was the pleasing thing. The way that we won the game, it wasn't just a get over the line, couple of points, labour through against a team we should beat. It was convincing.
Yeah,
which is what the best teams in the world have to do, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, and yeah, absolutely. And I guess the thing that, going back to what you were saying about the, it's tempting for managers to kind of change it up, rest players, try things, experiment, blah, blah, blah. It would have been really tempting for Pivac to do that because we got a bonus point against England, which, at the start of the tournament, you would never, maybe you guys did, but I would never have dreamed of. So there's even more temptation then to go, right, well, there's less pressure then to go and get the bonus point against Italy because we've got one against the opposition that we never thought we'd ever get a bonus point. Like you say, Dav, I thought it was a really clinical performance. We seemed really creative, and particularly for Dan Bigger as well, because, I feel like there've been points, me included, where, people have said, he's not creative enough. And because, Dan Bigger is excellent with, he's excellent. He's a great kicker, isn't he? He plays the margins well. He puts Wales in good positions, but, there've been question marks over whether he's creative enough. But some of his passes were flat right to the line against Italy, which, it was really impressive to watch.
So was it him who did the pass that was forward to Reece Zammit, which didn't get counted as a try?
Yes.
Could have been 8.
So we get 7, and then Jack Freeman's here going, but it could have been 8. Yeah, no, you are right. But Lewis Reece Zammit, as we said earlier, was looking like absolute lightning. It was just a really good performance, in all honesty. Really good performance. And like you said, Jack, there wasn't really any doubt. And like you said, Dad, the nature of the performance was pleasing more than the result itself.
Well, it was nice that he decided to rest people in the second half rather than the first. Set the momentum, batter them, then rest everybody. And I think
to be honest with you, when he made so many changes, I was like, oh gosh, he's made a lot of changes because he brought off Gareth Davis. Oh, did he bring off Gareth Davis? Yeah, I think he did. I think he brought off Gareth Davis, Dan Bigger. He brought off Alan Wynne. He brought off. I think he changed the whole of the front row at one point. He made loads of changes. He brought on I think it was a 13, wasn't it? He was on for North. Well, it's John. I don't even know. I lost track. He made so many changes, and for a little bit, it looked like the momentum had just stunted. And you were like, leave him on for an extra 10 minutes. But then they picked up again. So it was very impressive. I thought. Very impressive. All set up for a.
I think that's what was in his mind. They had the bonus point by half time. They got to 15. They got to 50 minutes, and you typically do clear the bench in the second half in rugby union these days. So it made sense to do with one eye on this weekend, really, wasn't it? Yeah. You want Alan Wynne-Jones, you want George North, you want them fit.
Well, and I think, to be honest with you, like you said, not more than any other sport, I think rugby, it is all about, when the game is out of sight, it's like, right, get them off, put them in bubble wrap, let's just protect them for the next game. As in...
Oh, it's a gladiatorial sport.
Well, it is, and, like...
Proper crunching
tackles. Yeah, exactly, like people like Alan Wynne-Jones, as in the guy is just an absolute unit. The last thing you'd want is for him to get injured for the French game. Captain... leader, and is injured in the second half against Italy when the game's already gone. So, yeah, I think you're right, Doug. I think he just used his head a little bit. It was like, well, the game's gone. Let's give some people a run out and get the game home, I guess. Moving on from that game then, France-England was, it was a bit of a thriller, I thought. I thought it was a cracking game. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember, I wouldn't say it was the most high-quality game I've seen, but it's got to be one of the most intense, as in, it just didn't stop for 80 minutes.
Yeah, well, Dupont scored, straight away, brutal. Didn't he? Basically, after a minute.
Yeah, straight away. And to be honest with you, the physicality, I know it's a bit of a cliche in rugby nowadays, but the physicality of the game was ridiculous, as in players were flying into tackles.
That's just what you want, being a Welsh fan. When you're going up against France after they've lost in such a grueling game.
Well, it's
a double down that physically and mentally broke.
Absolutely, because as in if France had won that game, yes, they'd be hurting physically, but they'd be like, we got through a battle there, and we come out the other side with a win. Whereas now they've got the physicality, they've got all of the wounds, I guess, but they haven't got the win on the other side. So yes, it's like you said, Jack, it's almost double down for France, really. But it could have gone either way, really, in all honesty. I just thought it was a really good game. Going
on about France, though, do you think they're actually as good as everyone was making out of them? Because, going into the Six Nations, they were the favourites, I think. I think most people would say they're probably on balance, on paper. People thought they had a really good shot at it. But, they've beaten a pretty bad Italy side, and they beat a good Ireland, but then they've lost to an England side, and they've had a COVID cancellation for the game against Scotland. So it's like, well, are they actually that good?
Well, I think that's really, slightly disrespectful to Ireland, because I don't think you only beat Ireland. Ireland are a very good team. And you've possibly answered your own question in mentioning COVID, because what we got to remember is the game that France had called off was the middle game week of the Six Nations, with a rest week either side. So by the time France came to play, it was 3 Saturdays, but actually 4 weeks. So some French players, they hadn't played in a month. Some of those players who were on the field last week had COVID. And even though they'd recovered, we don't know the physical effects fully. If that meant that Dupont was on 80% starting instead of 100%, those things do make a difference. So I think that COVID has got something to answer for there. In that, if France played England the week after they'd played Ireland, I think they would have beaten them. Yeah.
Mm. That's the point, actually. As in it's excuse me, and rugby again. It's another one of those games that is about momentum, isn't it? And I think Wales have very much shown that this year, this tournament. They've not exactly been vintage for all of the time that they've been playing, but they've ground out victories, kept the momentum going. I think this year is a bit of a weird one because, going into the tournament, France were favourites, I think. England haven't... Well, actually, let's not start with England. I think, Wales and Ireland, Wales are coming off the back of a difficult autumn series. Pivot had been in the job for a year and you were kind of looking at it, me included, going, is he the right man for the job? Ireland, they've had... I feel like Ireland right now are going through a bit of a change in the guard, as in they've got perhaps some older players who are in that kind of tricky phase where they're not they're still good enough to pick, but you've got to kind of have an eye on the future as well. Also, with a new coach, and Andy Farrell. So I don't know. I guess in a weird sense, there's a little bit of not that you don't expect much from Wales and Ireland because obviously they're generally two of the more successful sides in the tournament. But there's a lot going on there. Whereas with England, they've got Eddie Jones as their coach, and it has been. I think the thing that's gone against England is the whole debacle with the Saracens. In all honesty, is in like players like Billy Vunipola are only now like towards the last game of the tournament looking like they're even remotely match fit. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Ireland isn't quite as threatening a prospect as it has been in previous years. I mean, to be honest, I think I'd probably agree with Dav in what he says about France. I think,
do you still think that the French side was the best? Is the best side this year?
I think if they hadn't had COVID, I would have said yes. To be honest with you, as in, I feel like because they've got, like Dupont is the best number 9 in the world, and to be honest with you, right now Dupont is the best player in the world. I think it's as simple as that. As in, he is just unbelievably good. I don't know. They just seem to. It's a shame that they had COVID, to be honest with you, because I think now it'll always be a bit of a question mark. And to be honest with you,
do you reckon they can really put that much on COVID?
Well, I
think that's
but it's not just COVID though, is it? Because it's like Dav said, and you've got the COVID aspect in terms of how it affects players physically, but then also it's a month without rugby, and I feel like in rugby, like that sort of momentum, it's absolutely huge with the Six Nations. It's absolutely massive. So yeah, and at the end of the day, it's only one. I get what you're saying about they've only beaten. They've beaten Italy convincingly, and okay, Ireland aren't necessarily what they have been in the past, but it's still Ireland, as in they're still a good side. But as in, to be honest with you, I think the real test is when it's as simple as when it's Wales versus France. Right now, I think it's as simple as that, because England have kind of come from a couple of poor results and managed to put a win together. And equally, you could say the same about England with, this situation with the Saracens. Has that impacted their tournament? As in like England in that game against France were looking sharp. I would say it's the best they've been in the tournament so far. So yeah, it'll be a bit of a weird one, really. It's really difficult to judge. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's as simple as the table doesn't lie, and I think that's how it'll. We'll really know whether France are what we thought they were, or whether it is a case of nearly men, I guess.
Well, speaking of the table, Wales 9 points ahead of France. Do you reckon there's any chance France can win it? I mean, I've put the permutations for France to win in the notes, and it's if they want to win outright on points, France need to get a bonus point win against both Wales and Scotland and beat Wales by more than 7. But if they just want to do it on points difference, or goals, I would say goals difference doesn't really make sense, but yeah, points difference as in the score, they only have to get a bonus point in one of them, or they just beat Wales by less, what was that one? Or beat Wales by less than 7, but then make sure they outscore them. So there's a couple of different ways it can go.
I mean,
but do you reckon? Go on.
Yeah, there's a lot of different permutations, and I think that's a good thing about the Six Nations. But go on.
In a simplified way, I just put it as France just need to beat Wales by at least 7, and then going into the Scotland game, they just got to put up as many points as they can to win it. Do you reckon there's a chance that France could do both of those things?
I think so. To be honest with you, I think it's going to come down to the mental impact of the England-France game. I think if France can kind of get themselves together and go, right, we go again, as in the way France played last week, as in I would back France to beat Wales, in all honesty. As in, let's be fair, like despite having had 4 weeks off, multiple players with COVID, they've only lost to England by 3 points when it's England's best performance in the Championship. So I think it's very doable, very doable. And, I guess the thing with France is it is very much still a case of it's in their hands. And I think that's such a huge motivator for a player. If you know that you can influence what's going to happen going forward. Yeah.
I think the shame is that it's almost Super Saturday, isn't it? It's not Super Saturday. It's just about Super Saturday, not quite.
Yeah, it's a weird...
Yeah, and that takes the shine off it
Super
a little
Saturday,
bit because,
part one.
Were France to beat Wales on Saturday evening, everyone goes, "Oh, right, okay, we'll come back on Friday, see what happens," because France are playing Scotland next Friday, aren't they? So that's when it's been rescheduled for. So they'll have to play 2 games in 6 days. But I think the mental aspect of it is right, because on paper you would say like the French do look so dangerous, like their back line, like Teddy Thomas, Vakatawa, Fico, Peno, like Jalibert up fly half. They have got quality in that team
as well.
But then if you're in the Welsh camp, you're thinking like things have gone for us this tournament, and they've clicked more the more that they've gone on. Like the first 3 games of the tournament, I didn't think they'd beat Ireland, I didn't think they'd beat Scotland, and I didn't think they'd beat England. But here we are, having won 4 in a row.
No, same.
I think so much of it is mental, isn't it? Really, if they get themselves up for it, and if you can't get yourself up for a game like this on Saturday, then you're in the wrong job, aren't you? So I think
you never will. Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to that psychological impact, and you've got to look at it like Dupont is playing again, Olivon is playing, their captain, both of them had COVID, and a couple of others did. I don't think we can. It's one of those mysteries, isn't it? I know it's a different sport, but when Newcastle United had COVID in their squad, you had some players like Sam Maximan. Exactly.
Yeah, he didn't come back for months, did he? He was properly
top of their game, and yet it affects them. Even though these guys might not have been impacted in exactly the same way, you just don't know the effect that will have. But I would like to think, you get to the point now where you've just got to say, I think Wales will win, because I haven't said it up to now. So you've got to say it, haven't you?
Yeah. I don't know. It's such a tricky one to call. I really don't know how it's going to go.
Well, Wales beat England, and England beat France, so therefore Wales are going to win this all.
Fair enough. Should we do a brief? Well, actually, no. Hang on. You've got some more notes here. Let's have a look.
No, it's all good.
That's it.
I did put about England. Are they a good? Well, was this a sign that England are going to sort of stick it all together? Like, because there was questions about, are they going to rebuild? Are they going to clear out, the old guard of Owen Fowler and a couple of them? But does a performance like this sort of say, yeah, okay, they'll stick with this for at least the World Cup?
I mean, to be honest with you, the thing that hasn't really been talked about a lot, and it's probably because there's still question marks, is the Lions. As in, what is this going to do for the Lions squad? As in, you've got a lot of players, well, particularly from the Welsh team, who at the start of the tournament probably wouldn't have really been considered, who have basically played themselves into the tournament, I think. Sorry, into the Lions squad. So, but yeah, sorry, Jack, in answer to your question, I just went on a bit of a tangent then. In answer to your question, I think England have still got, as in like Owen Farrell for me is the best. He's the best inside centre in the Northern Hemisphere. Personally, I think. They're still a very good side with England, but I don't know. They seem to have like a few of these kind of like mini dawns where they'll have like one absolutely outstanding game. And I don't know. I always feel like with England, they have such a huge talent pool. As in.
Well, it's 30 times bigger than Wales is, with their 60 million population to our 3.
As in
20 times.
Going into that game with France, as in if England lost, England were kind of looking at the prospect of finishing fifth potentially, which
that would have been embarrassing.
yeah, exactly. That's almost unheard of. So yeah, it's been a bit of a weird tournament for England, really. I guess we'll just have to see what the table is like at the end. The table doesn't lie. Final game of the weekend then was Scotland versus Ireland. Ireland winning 27-24. I don't know. I feel, to be honest with you, because did you watch this game, Jack, or did you say you didn't watch it?
Yeah,
I did not watch
watched it.
I mean, did you watch it, Dave?
I kept tabs on it.
Okay. I mean, I feel like it was a bit of a, in terms of quality, I feel like it was a slight step down from France.
Yeah, it was a different kind of game.
A bit unfair. What were your thoughts, Dave?
I think, but I don't think Scotland could complain ultimately. I mean, it was interesting. You mentioned the Lions. It was kind of billed a little bit as Sexton versus Russell for like a potential, we do this in a Lions year, two potential fly halves. They play very different ways. Sexton controls the game much better than Russell, but Russell can he does things that other fly halves don't really spot or do. But Sexton, based on that game, Sexton is your fly half for the Lions at the moment because he set up a try with that cross kick. He controlled the game, and crucially, he kicked his pressure penalty, whereas Russell did miss one, which was a bit more straightforward earlier in the match. So, it was a different game. I always think they are a little bit when it's like a home nations game. Sometimes it can be a little bit more attritional, but.
Yes, that's not a bad point actually. And you look at the way that Ireland have kind of moved. I feel like there's been a bit of a shift with Ireland, as in Ireland have always been kind of very tactically astute, quite creative, but as in terms of physicality, they've always been a bit on the lighter side. Whereas I feel like under Andy Farrell, they've become a bit more of a unit, really, to be honest. And I feel like Scotland have kind of shored themselves up a bit, as in 2 or 3 years ago. As in, you looked at Scotland and you would think there's a potential that they could score 50, but also concede 50 in one game. So like you said, Dev, I think it was a bit of an attritional battle. I don't know what your thoughts were, Jack, following it.
I was keeping tabs on BBC Sport app.
Yeah. And
I did notice that Ireland won up 24-10, and somehow Scotland brought it all the way back to 24 apiece. I was just bizarre. I was amazed. I was thinking, what's going on in that game? I thought it was all done and dusted before I checked back at it. But I mean, I don't really have too many thoughts on it.
I mean, the thing with Scotland is as well, is it a case of another bit of a false dawn? As in, they got that result against England, at Twickenham, and you're like, have Scotland finally got the monkey off their back? And then all of a sudden, you're looking at the table, and who have they got left to play? Scotland,
Italy, the fortunate ones.
Yeah, Italy and France.
Oh, and France, yeah. So to be fair, as much as it's like, they're fifth, it's like they have got to play Italy, which everybody else has. So instantly, there's 4 points. Is it for a win? Is that right? Yeah, 4. So instantly go up to 10. So at least level with England at that stage. But also, I mean, it's not inconceivable that Scotland can beat France.
Oh no, definitely not. Definitely not.
There's a chance. There's a chance. So who knows? They could end up finishing second or third.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a difficult one to call. I feel like this has been a bit of a topsy-turvy tournament, in all honesty. But I don't know. I guess as a Scotland fan, I mean, I don't know because I'm not Scottish, but you perhaps beating England at Twickenham, you would have thought, right, this is quite a promising Six Nations, and again, you kind of.
I think if you were a Scottish fan, though, you'd be cursing your luck, wouldn't you, if you believed in such things? Because when as you say, they beat England at Twickenham, they come back to Murrayfield, lose a game against Wales they really should have won. Were it not for an unfortunate red card, and even then it was by a point.
Exactly.
And then, even though they haven't had COVID, so it's not the same thing physically, but they went a month without playing rugby as a squad. I know some were released to their clubs to play, but you went 4 weeks without playing as Scotland into a big game against Ireland, and Ireland had they had played, even though they'd lost against France, they had played in that middle week. So it's that same thing again of momentum. So Scotland, I think they'll be a bit gutted about that, because if they had that red card, they could have won that game.
It's true.
If they'd had the momentum, it's not to say they'd have beaten France in that third game anyway, but you probably look back at that and think, oh, we could have given this a better go. Yeah.
No. You don't know, do you?
Like, very much so. Another year comes around. They've just beaten England. They should beat Wales. Then you've got 2 on the bounce. You're playing the best team. You don't know what's going to happen. But in this polar opposite world of COVID, it's like, well, you've got 1 win out of the 3 now. It's like, it's got to be so demoralising for them in terms of just nothing seems to be working.
No, it's not falling their way, is it, Scotland? Here we are. Well,
do you think the Scotland guys have a chance of making the Lions? I mean, there was quite a lot of hype about them saying, "Oh, this is their time. This is their time." Do you think many of them are going to make it?
I mean, what you've got to consider is that in the last Lions tournament, only 2 Scottish players went. Yeah. Which were, I believe, Stuart Hogg and Sean Maitland, I think. Yeah, there we are. So I feel like it was only going to get better for Scotland, really.
Can't go backwards.
Yeah, well, the only way you can go backwards from that is by literally just having Stuart Hogg. And to be honest with you, I think that would be a big disservice to Scotland, because I think there's a lot of Scottish players who have, they've done themselves well in the past couple of years, really, as in, like
Hamish Watson.
Hamish Watson for me, as in he's excellent. I think Hamish Watson. You've got Finn Russell at 10, who he's not everyone's cup of tea, but you can't deny that he's very creative and talented as a number 10. You've got some really good players there, I think. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one, the Lions, because it really does depend on who your coach is. As in, Gatlin seems to be, he doesn't tend to necessarily go with form. He goes for tried and tested. And that doesn't necessarily mean Welsh players, but as in, I think you're going to see a big contingent of Welsh players based on how they performed. As in, I think a lot of them have played themselves into the tour, assuming it goes ahead. I think you're going to see a lot of England players, because I think even though they won't necessarily finish they may not necessarily finish in second or first or whatever. You can't deny that Owen Farrell is outstanding, Atoje is outstanding, Billy Vunipola on his day is excellent. It's not like all of a sudden England have become a bad side. But yeah, I think Scotland have definitely, they've not done themselves any harm with how they've played in the past couple of years, really. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned about Wales probably having a big contingent because of the way they've played this year, but we've also mentioned that they've been somewhat fortunate with the red cards and the way COVID has fallen. Do you think there's the potential that the Lions could get quite badly embarrassed if he picks too many Welsh guys and they aren't actually as good as it's all being perceived because they've been a little bit fortunate? Do you think it's like it could go downhill quite quickly
potentially
if it isn't actually as...
Potentially. I mean, I guess you'd have to consider how this game with France goes, because I think if Wales end up getting convincingly beaten by France, I think all of a sudden there are question marks. But I guess the thing you've got to remember with the Lions is that just because they go on the tour doesn't mean they necessarily start. As in, I guess they were playing, like, for example, Lewis Rees-Zammit, he's played his way into the Lions tour. For me, it's as simple as that when you look at how good he's been. And, I guess there are perhaps players who, before you'd kind of, like, perhaps like Taulupe Faletau, for example, before this tournament, you'd be like, oh, I'm not sure about Taulupe Faletau, but in this tournament, he's been really, really good. So, although I do get what you're saying, it is a bit dangerous. And that's why this tournament has been a bit topsy-turvy, really, because I think if you look in terms of how the games have played out, you could say, well, Wales have beaten a rubbish Italy side, and then against the other 3 teams they've played, they've had the rub of the green. But then at the end of the day, sport is a results game, and Wales are undefeated.
I think on the whole embarrassment thing, like, one thing to remember is that South Africa haven't played a game of rugby since the World Cup final, I think. Because, they didn't play in the... Well, what was it in the end? The Tri-Nations, was it? What do they call it? the Rugby Championship. Yeah, they didn't play in
Four
that.
Nations.
So
the rugby championship.
They're going to be a little bit rusty, maybe as a unit together. I think when it comes to the thing with the Lions is that it's a very unenviable task, because whenever a squad is picked, you always think, oh, he's unlucky. Yeah, he's unlucky. Like you mentioned Faletau, like I think like he's a Lion, he's proven quality.
Yeah.
But then there's so many good back row options across those four nations. Someone is going to be unlucky and miss out. So, and that I think is a little bit to do with form. There's always a few like dark horses who bolt right at the end. For example, I think Louis Rees-Zammit, he could be one of those bolters, not necessarily to get in the first 15, but to get into the squad. You always have a couple of players like that. I think was it last time around, Jamie George, he played for the Lions before he played for England.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in that tournament, Dylan Hartley started like every game, but Warren Gatland so I'm taking Jamie George and Dylan Hartley staying at home. And I guess that's what I mean. It does. It's almost a blend of form and what Gatland wants.
Yeah, definitely. I think
what makes it so unpredictable.
A little bit new. Once the Six Nations all settles down, that'll be a podcast in itself, I'm sure, with the Lions. If it happens, of course, we're still waiting to hear for sure what they're going to do. Are they going to play? Are they going to play it over here with fans spread out? Are they going to do it behind closed doors in South Africa? Still not being called for sure, is it?
Yeah, no. I mean, it would be such a shame, because the Lions is one of those. You don't really get that sort of thing in other sports, I don't think, not to the same extent. It would be a shame if it didn't go ahead. But there we are. Here's to hoping. Right. Should we finish off with our stats of the week?
Yeah, let's do that.
Who went first last time? I can't remember.
I'll go first. I've got a great stat for you, lads. Right?
Dav, do you want to go first this time?
To make you feel really old, this season is the first season since the 2004-05 season that will see neither Ronaldo or Messi in a Champions League quarter-final. So if you want one of those generational shift, changing of the guard moments, I know there's been a lot said about that with Haaland and Mbappe, but I think that's one of those stats that says, the tide is turning. The best of Messi and Ronaldo, is it possibly behind us? We'll have to wait and see. But the fact that neither of them are in a quarter-final of the Champions League, I think is a significant moment and a good stat.
I tell you what, I'm glad you've come on this podcast. Some of these highlights and stats are insane.
You finished off on a good note there, Dav. You've done well in it.
That is incredible.
Well, do you want to follow up that stat, Jack?
Mine is football related.
Okay.
I think yours is as well. Yeah. But mine is to do with Atletico Madrid. And I saw this on Twitter last week, and it's Diego Simeone, Atletico Madrid manager. He has coached 19 full matches. That is 1,710 minutes against Getafe in particular. So throughout all the seasons he's been at Atletico, he has coached 1,710 minutes against Getafe. And Getafe have never scored against him in that time. I just thought, that's incredible. That's almost it's almost half a season, rather, of football, and they haven't managed to score a goal past Atletico Madrid.
That's mega, isn't it?
Shocked.
That is absolutely mega. Cool, we've got some good competitors for stats of the week this week. Right, my stat of the week is that Harry Kane is the only Englishman with more non-penalty goals and assists in Europe's top 5 leagues this season than Patrick Bamford.
That is niche.
Yeah, that is very niche. Do you know what? It's more niche. It is more niche.
I can't think of any other English strikers.
Rashford.
Jamie Vardy, actually.
Well, would you class him as a striker, winger, jury's out?
That's
that is very niche, actually, because when I read it the first time, I didn't clock that it said the only Englishman. Like, if it had just been like the only player, then it would be like, whoa, Patrick Bamford doing the business. But on the other side, like, Patrick Bamford was proper.
Yeah, to be fair,
he was properly struggling for Leeds, wasn't he? Did I imagine that?
Yeah, in the Championship, he couldn't score that many. But I'll be honest, I thought he was going to do a Timu Puki. I never put him in my fantasy team, thinking at some point it's going to die off, and it never did.
Regardless
assists.
of the first part of that stat, as in 12 goals and 5 assists in the Premier League. When you're playing for a newly promoted side, there's no bad return at all, really. It's quite impressive. There we are. That brings to a close episode 19 of the Down to the Wire podcast. As always, we are on Spotify and YouTube. Why not give us a follow and subscribe if you're on YouTube? We'd really appreciate it. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Anchor. I think I've got them all.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Dad,
thank you, gents.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, you've brought some absolutely glorious knowledge to this podcast, and we've enjoyed having you. And Jack and I will be back next week, right?
That is true, and that is next week. Will be just before the first Formula One race.
So
of the season.
big, and down to what am I talking about? Drive to Survive coming out tomorrow. So
yes, comes out tomorrow.
We may discuss that if we've watched enough of it.
I'm buzzing.
So next week should be a good one.